I'm really excited to introduce our next presenters, Christopher and Mike Farah. Chris and Mike grew up in Ann Arbor and now live and work in California. Mike is the president of production at Funny or Die, and Chris consults there while working on other film and entertainment projects. Both continue to have very strong ties to Michigan. In fact, one of the titles that they considered using for their session today was, "Where Can Creativity Bloom? From Mitten to LA and back again, and again, and again, and again." Mike and Chris are going to tell us how their Ann Arbor upbringing led them to where they are today. Please welcome Chris and Mike Farah.
Thank you. Hello. Well, thanks so much for having us. Thanks to Deb for having us out. Tom, I was expecting a little bit more out of that introduction, but we can talk about that later. This is Chris. I'm Mike. We're going to do something a little different. We're going to actually interview each other. We've never done this before. Might get a little heated, might get a little emotional. We just don't know yet. And actually what we have up here, we actually just found these. Actually, a few years ago, my dad brought these down and said, "Should I throw these away?" Every time you come home, your parents are just looking for more things to throw away from your youth. And I said, no, because that's the very first thing we ever started working on. I guess, what was that, 2001? I had just graduated. I had no idea what I wanted to do. So we met up on a roof and started an outline for a script that, as you can see, ended in Act 2. So we gave up on the outline, but we kept the script going, and that's what I moved to with LA 14 years ago, thinking, of course this is going to get made. Don't they know this is the best script no one's heard of? Naturally, nothing happened with it. But that's all right. So we're going to show a quick clip of some of the things we've worked on, and then sit down.
Yeah, this is where we kind of started, which we actually did, and I drive by this place all the time. I was in grad school at Michigan, and we did this on the roof. It was on State Street on campus. So we started out there, and 15 years later, 14 years later,
yeah.
This is kind of where we've ended up, the video clips that you're about to see.
Sorry I had to cancel a few times. My mouse pad broke last week, and I had to get my great aunt some diabetes shoes, and
You know what, Zach, it's no problem.
What is it like to be the last black president?
Seriously? What's it like for this to be the last time you ever talk to a president?
It must kind of stink, though, that you can't run, 3 times,
No, actually, I think it's a good idea. If I ran a third time, it'd be sort of like doing a third Hangover movie. Didn't really work out very well, did it?
My name is Mike Barwis, and I founded Barwis Methods.
There's no quitting you. Bring it up there now, let's go.
We train everybody in the phone book. The NFL's top athlete, the obese person, the Olympic sprinter, high school football player.
The atmosphere it's electric. And everybody's like going ape shit out there. You got freaking guys with shirts off and ties on.
The atmosphere drives an athlete.
Get that poison, let it out. Exercise the demons.
Music gets us through it.
You ever seen the movie White Men Can't Jump? White Men Can't Dance.
There's only about a couple times I'll ever be quiet in this gym.
Who's running the fucking radio?
Days stumbling by, drunk on the wine of time. Hours piling high.
Next question.
Okay.
I didn't even watch.
What award does the winner of the PGA Championship receive? Starts with a W. Ends with a sound. All right. Sounds like a swan. Okay, think about a swan. Swanamaker.
The Wanamaker Trophy.
Yes, he was the ice.
That's it?
That's it. I hadn't actually watched that thing before we got up here.
I'm curious, did anyone hear about our show American Muscle that was on last year for a whopping total of 3 episodes? That's why it was canceled. And also, I'm always curious, how many people here know what Funny or Die is? Oh, did you just find out when you read our bio today, or you actually knew what it was? All right, cool. This is our demo, in case anyone was wondering. This is how we, no. Chris, how's it going?
I'm doing well. I love the fact that we're talking during lunch. I've had a hard time figuring out if that's like a good thing, like, hey, everybody's eating, put these guys on during lunch, or if it's just like, let's just put these guys on during lunch because everybody will be eating and nobody's really going to care or whatever. I actually thought, do you remember this? We were growing up and we would eat next to each other all the time. And I remember one time just turning to you and saying, do you ever listen to the sounds that you make in your mouth when you're eating? And you were just like, what are you talking about? And I was just like, you're disgusting. You just make the worst, grossest sounds.
How old were we?
I think this was just
6 weeks ago?
7 weeks ago, give or take. Being brothers and working together for a very long time. Am I crazy? Like, do you ever, like, if you're married or anything like that, do you ever listen to the sounds that the person you're eating with makes? It's very, very
This
strange.
is totally off script. You're improvising on me already.
Sorry. So what we wanted to do, because so much of what we have ended up doing really comes back to our roots in Michigan, we just decided to kind of talk about that, but also talk about it in a way that we hoped would be a little bit more interesting than us just talking. And that was to, ask each other questions about how we got from where we started out to where we've ended up, and stuff that we actually don't even necessarily know, like things that I've actually always wanted to ask my brother, but just because he's a frightening individual, I've never been able to get up the nerve.
We also have no idea how to work PowerPoint, so this seemed way easier. We've actually never opened it up. But yeah, no, it's we're very fortunate to do what we get to do, and we've been very fortunate to come back to Michigan time and time again to do it. So hopefully what you'll take from this is that whether you're in Michigan, LA, wherever, these are hopefully some of the things that we're talking about are themes and practices that anyone can really do anywhere. I know there's some students in here, there's people who work with students all the time, and we had no connection to the entertainment industry whatsoever. And when you tell people you're moving out to LA, I'll go off script now for you. I remember I went to Indiana University as well. There's a lot of Hoosiers here, it seems. My mom, my dad, and my brother all went to Michigan, and I was a finance major in college, and the only thing I knew was that I wanted nothing to do with finance or the real world. Everything was just too real out here. And remember, I went to dinner with Parker and his mom, and we, it was like towards the end of graduating, parents were in town, people were going out to dinner, and she was just like, so, Michael, what are you going to do after graduation? And I paused dramatically, and I looked at her, and I said, I'm moving to LA. I'm taking it to Hollywood. I'm taking my talents to Hollywood, like LeBron would say. And then she countered my dramatic beat with her own dramatic beat, and just looked at me and said, well, I hope you have a better idea than that. And I didn't. And that's the great thing. I was just like, I'm disappointed that our sign language friend isn't up here anymore, because I was just going to swear, and I wanted to see how she would capture that moment.
I wanted to try to use different slang and see if it actually translated.
And it was great. Like, when Pam Parker said that to me, I was just like, that's the greatest thing anyone could tell me. I was just like, that's why I'm going, because no one thinks you can do it. But the thing is, now it's even easier to do this stuff. Like, I moved out there in the fall of 2001, and we'll get to it, but we were talking about, like, if I graduated now, would I even feel the need to move out to LA? Because technology, everything has changed so much. Actually, we were just talking with our mom yesterday. This is our mom right here, if you want to wave. That's great, yeah. She was just saying, we were talking about at lunch yesterday, how my job didn't even exist when I moved out to LA in 2001, and just shows you how much things are changing and continues to change, and I think that's so great for people here in Michigan, because you don't have to be in LA and New York anymore.
Oh, and by the way, I think there's going to be a Q&A thing at the end of all of this. But also, if anybody thinks of any better questions, which I'm sure you will, feel free to raise your hand. And we want this to be interactive. We're all just eating here. It's no big deal.
Okay, I've got a question for you. All right, so...
I had a question first, but that's fine.
Do you want to start?
I think I do.
Okay.
You were just talking about when you got started, and one of the cool things about where we're at is seeing all of the artists doing really great work around us. And I feel like especially when you're in Michigan and you get started, or Indiana, and if you say you want to get into something creative, which is what these guys deal with all the time, you come up against people saying things like, well, I hope you've got a better plan, blah, blah,
Right.
blah, than that.
Pam Parker.
Yeah, so when you went to LA, because look, like seriously, this, I mean, we turned it into a script, but basically this, I won't even tell you what it was about because everybody's eating, but anyway, is literally what he went out there with, and he got there, and it was like, and you just went around telling people, I'm here because I'm gonna sell this movie. And just FYI, if you go to Hollywood, that's like the dumbest thing you can tell anybody, basically, because it's like everybody, you can go to a gas station and everybody who's there has like 5 scripts that they all say that they're gonna sell. Or it's like, oh, I know this millionaire and this millionaire is about to give me money for this, blah, blah, blah. But so, given that we had so little structure or planning, like I feel like everybody here is, like you guys do things in the real world, you plan everything like that, but we didn't have any of that. What was it that got you from that to actually see your way through to making money doing it?
That's a good question. I think if you're a creative person, you have to be a little delusional, you know, because no one's going to hand these things to you. It really is a little bit of a war of attrition, and whether you're doing that in Michigan or LA, you just have to keep going. And I was fortunate. I packed up. I drove across the country. I came back here after graduating and saved up money. I was a bartender at Palio's on Main Street. And I saved up money, and we drove across the country. And I was fortunate because I had no idea what I wanted to do, but as soon as I got to LA, it all made sense for me. It just felt very comfortable. I loved the weather. I loved the hustle. I loved that everyone is totally full of shit. Because if you're not full of shit, that's how you differentiate yourself. If you actually are trustworthy and hardworking and people kind of like you, you can kind of do anything you want out there because all those other people just kind of fade away. So every day, this many people are trying to do creative endeavors, whether it's in LA, Michigan, or New York, and each day people kind of give up. And if you kind of combine that patience with persistence, you can make it. And we're very fortunate. Both of our parents we never grew up with bosses. Like our mom and dad and everyone that was in our lives didn't report to anyone. And they always had a great time doing what they were doing. So I was just like, why spend this money in school and go to college and then have a boss? Like, why don't you just do whatever you want to do? Like and you know, I was able to do that. I was very fortunate, like to.
Well, you should tell them your track record of having bosses when you got to Hollywood until.
I was fired nonstop. I was actually, not many people can do this, but I was actually fired from an unpaid internship at New Regency. So I had to go to Santa Monica Community College, which is a great community college, enroll in an internship class to be able to join an internship unpaid internship I was then fired from. And because it was a terrible internship, but they would just make you go into this big room and make copies. But next to the copy room, there was just these huge filing cabinets, and it would have like Fight Club was a whole filing cabinet. And you would just go, and within that, and that's one of my favorite movies, you would just see everything, because this was like in 2001, there was no cloud. It was just paper that you could read. And I'd go and like, oh, there's an email from Brad Pitt to Ed Norton and David Fincher talking about revisions he wants on page 27. why would I be making copies when I could read this entire history of this movie? And I did that with all of their movies, and then what they would do, you would have to make these copies, and then these sons of bitches would make you write your initials on the back of the script, so you were accountable if there were missing pages. And because you would prepare all these executives these weekend reads, which is the most inefficient thing known to man. And then eventually, after my third weekend of weekend reads, where people were complaining, who's this MF kid? Because every time I go to read a script, it's missing pages. They asked me to leave.
See, what's funny is that kind of attitude, I feel like, can either end up making you president of production of Funny or Die, or just completely unemployed.
Yeah, there's no middle ground.
And in a sense, that's kind of what you're talking about as far as like the war of attrition goes. Like and this is what you've always told me, is that when you decide to do something like this, you almost can't have a good backup.
No.
Because I do want to, so a lot of this is just going to be us reminiscing. I'm not sure
Deb
why.
is thrilled she paid for our flight right now.
We're going to do the thing later, too.
Yeah.
But what was that who is that? Who is the singer who did that I'm Like a Bird song?
Nelly Furtado.
Yeah, he went, so being not full of bullshit or whatever and like an honest guy, I do remember you going to see the Nelly Furtado concert, and you were just like, yeah, we got behind the stage, we got backstage passes, and I was just like, how? And you were just like, I just told him I was a producer who was working with Nelly Furtado, and I was just like, really? And he was just like, yeah, it's just so easy to make that kind of stuff up. Everybody does it, it's no big deal.
No, that's true. I don't lie, I just project a future that hasn't happened yet. And then I did meet Nelly, and they thought, like, a bunch of the security guards thought I was her boyfriend. And then we went and we chatted about that script, which I still think she would have been a great fit for it, but
that's actually true.
It wasn't meant to be.
But that's how you got President Obama to be in. Now,
yeah.
The Obama video has gone on to be both a huge success, and then also just something that has helped, I think, everybody in the country become more aware of Funny or Die. And I distinctly remember you and us starting out working the political angle, starting to do political videos for the White House, all with the end game of eventually getting Obama to do a video.
Yeah, I started, we're fast forwarding a little bit, but the reason I got my job at Funny or Die was because Chris and I started making stuff together. And there was the beautiful thing about the internet and the writer's strike that happened in 2007. The internet made anyone a producer. Now you can be a producer. You can make a movie with your smartphone, obviously. And so what we were able to do, we just started doing things that we thought were funny and we were excited about. And so that's how I had no connection to Will Ferrell. I had no connection to Funny or Die, but Funny or Die ended up featuring a lot of the things that my brother and I worked on. And that's how Will and Adam McKay and Chris Henchy, they hired me to be the first producer. So that was the summer of 2008. And so that was when the campaign, obviously everyone's campaigning for the 2008 election. And I personally was a fan of now President Obama. And I was just chatting casually with some of the guys I worked with. I was just like, oh yeah, it's gonna be great when we get a chance to work with President Obama. He hadn't been elected yet, but I just knew he was gonna win. And everyone looked at me like I was full of shit. I was just like, what are you talking? Of course this is gonna happen. Not because I thought like I was being a little delusional, but look at how he was elected and look how forward thinking he was and look at what the internet and young people, meant to his campaign. And we have this platform that was only getting bigger. We have this audience that's young and diverse, and like there is going to be a moment when he needs us. And it's going to be a win-win kind of situation. No one believed me, so I actually signed, I should have given them that picture to show actually. I signed a piece of paper, they wrote up a contract, and it said like, it's in my phone, I could pull it up, but basically it guaranteed that Funny or Die would have the chance to meet and work with President Obama between that day and 2016, presupposing that he was going to be elected for a second time. So I signed it. And so then when I've been fortunate enough to go to the correspondence dinner in White House, at the White House Correspondence Dinner many times, and they always would invite people like me to the White House to kind of hear what the administration was working on, and maybe creative people could kind of get behind it. I heard about the Affordable Care Act. Obviously, I knew all about it. It's so interesting because the president is such a great campaigner, but governing's a whole different situation. I actually think he has a lot of issues with governing. And they were describing this thing that it was like they had spent all this time and money on the biggest movie of all time, but had no money and no idea how to market it. And I was like insulted by this. And I stood up and I said, this is insane. Like, because the government isn't set up to sell things. They don't know how to do it. But I knew this was something very personal to him. I knew there was a window there, and I knew because they were trying to get young people to sign up, which would help people and keep the premiums down. What are you laughing at?
Do you remember when we went to that lunch this was at William Morris Endeavor, and it was like one of his John Carson, I think?
Yeah,
like
from
I would
the
get
head of OFA.
emails
Yeah.
And he was describing, it was so amazing. Like, he was describing how they would get the word out, and yet using like 1,000 words to say absolutely nothing, like over and over and over again.
Yeah,
and
that's government.
And I thought of that when you said got offended, because I think you were at that breakfast.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, because I got pissed off.
Yeah, you got fired up.
Yeah, and I was just like, what are you actually saying?
The only place that likes meetings more than Hollywood is DC. Like, the people just meet for the sake of meeting. Nothing ever comes out of it. And so if you're actually someone who says something and then does it, again, that's another way to differentiate yourself. And so
it's actually true. And that's why DC likes working with Funny or Die so much. It's because one of the way Funny or Die has differentiated itself, one of the ways they've differentiated themselves is by being able to have a concept and then execute it within like a matter of a week or two.
Yeah, so we did that, and then I started, getting to know Valerie Jarrett, who is very close to the president, and actually got her law degree from Michigan. And Chris and a bunch of writers and I went out to DC just to go and meet with different people and pitch ideas and kind of get some momentum going. Then the Affordable Care Act started, picking up steam, and we started making all these videos. So it wasn't like we just started with the president. We did something with Jennifer Hudson. We did something with Billy Eichner and Olivia Wilde, a few other things. So they know, like, oh yeah, we're actually, and we paid for it because it kind of worked into what we do. We make a lot of topical, political, hopefully funny content, and it was relevant to our audience. So it fit into our business model. And then thankfully, well, not thankfully, but obviously the website didn't do all that well. And they had to kind of hit pause. And then when the website was coming back, the president decided to get more personally involved in things. I first pitched the president doing Between Two Ferns to David Axelrod in 2010. And then I'm friends with an actor named Cal Penn. You might know him from the Harold and Kumar series. He left acting and actually went and worked at the White House. And it was nice because I sent him an email for why we had to get this going. And after the video actually came out, he congratulated me by sending me back my email. And it was nice because everything I said would happen actually happened. But again, you don't have to be a smart person to think that's going to work out well. And so the opportunity was there. The opportunity was there, and we started working on it. And they needed it, and so it was like a win-win, and we made it, and it did well. And then they threw a party for us after the fact, after the enrollment ended, and I took my mom with me to the White House, and I showed the president that letter that I had signed in 2008, and he liked it, and he wrote on it, "I'm glad you won the bet, and thanks for everything, Barack Obama."
So I feel like we've established that delusion and persistence are very, very necessary.
That should have been the name of our presentation.
To succeed at this. A good subtitle. You were kind of talking about this. For Funny or Die to happen, a whole lot of things had to converge at one time. The internet and comedy videos getting going, like people figuring out a little bit how to make money off of it, the Hollywood writers' strike happening, that kind of thing. Given that we're in Michigan now, do you see something like that being able to happen here for anything? You know, like you were just in South by Southwest, for example.
Yeah.
And at this point, you know, what's cool about that and with Austin is that people go there just to be there for that entire festival. That's become its own thing, you know? Like you don't go there and say like, oh, I wish I was back in Hollywood for this, or I wish, you know what I mean? What do you feel like in Michigan could be its own kind of like funny or die experience, or make Michigan like its own hub where they weren't depending on, you know, giving rebates to films and that kind of thing and hoping that they would come and spend money here, but they had their own thing going. We benefited from those rebates, by the way.
Oh,
so
yeah.
I'm not trashing. We wouldn't have been able to make our movie.
I will answer that, then I'm going to ask you a question because I feel like I'm talking
We have
too
1
much.
minute left.
Oh, goodness.
I knew that, which is why I made sure to ask the last question so you would be able to ask me
That
one.
went fast. Everything comes down to the people. So it could totally happen in Michigan, and it should happen in Michigan. There has never been an easier time in the history of the world to make content. So that's tough because now there's a lot of crap out there, and there's a lot of clutter, and you have to have something and a point of view and a voice that can kind of break through that. But I got upgraded on the flight from Austin to Detroit, and I sat next to a very heavy-set fellow who created the Home Shopping Network, and he was on his way, and we really hit it off, and we're actually having a meeting in LA next week. He owns 186 acres on the top of Beverly Hills, and he wants to have a business meeting up there.
Does everybody remember Annie Hall? What's amazing is that Annie Hall is describing a reality that still exists today. When he goes to Hollywood and they're like, we're gonna have a meeting about a conference about a meeting, that's exactly what it's like now. Like technology and everything has changed. The love for meetings has not changed.
That's true. Anyways, so yes, it's never been easier. I hate the word disruption, but it is a real thing. Everything is changing so much. And it comes down to the people and their willingness to kind of put themselves out there. Whether you move away or you're here in Michigan, you have to put yourself outside of your comfort zone and do things that no one cares about. And it's really all up to you to make that happen. And there's, you know, things like this where you can meet people and a connection can lead to a meeting that can lead to something actually changing the world. So I really believe that, and I think, you know, we have a long ways to go, but at the same time, you know, by leaving our comfort zone and doing things that were unexpected, it's a great way to spend the day, and it's never been easier to try and find that niche for yourself, but you have to put in the work, you definitely have to hustle, and ultimately you have to have an idea that no one else has had. I don't know what that idea is. But good ideas definitely rise to the top. And also, there's lots of different ways to find yourself working in entertainment or creative things. It doesn't have to be your initial calling. You could be, you know, something else could pop up that you can continue to do those things on the side, but you meet someone that can kind of change your life, and it's all there.
That is what's changed a lot. That's really cool. So we went to what at the time was a very small Catholic high school called Gabriel Richard in Ann Arbor, and the very idea that you could be involved in entertainment it wasn't just ridiculous, it just didn't make sense. It didn't compute. Like TV or whatever was something that you watched that came from someplace else, and Lord only knows how it got there, but it was pretty great. I watch a lot of TV. But anyways, when we started doing more work back here with the movie and promoting and that kind of thing, and we started talking to different high schools and whatever, and I actually went with one of our actors to Skyline High School, and is Pat here still?
Yeah,
Hey.
there she is.
And she was running a program, and still is running a program where it's teaching all of these kids who are in like, you know, high school, very young and that kind of thing, how to use the exact same kind of editing tools and cameras and that kind of thing that everybody uses in LA when they're making things. And these kids knew how to use editing software that I still have no idea how to use, which is actually probably a good thing because then you have to hire editors and say, please make this happen, and it's very simple for them. But anyways, the point being that that also has changed. That whole way of thinking that being out here means that art or creativity or whatever is just inaccessible because it happens someplace else. That no longer exists anymore. And I saw it even like at the high school level that kids are able to go in there and figure out like we can make this kind of stuff that looks, for better or worse, exactly like the kind of stuff that they put on Funny or Die or that Funny or Die puts on TV. So that automatically gives them a much better start than we actually had.
Yeah, definitely. And one last thing.
I couldn't tell. Oh, okay. We're back to 1 minute now.
You also have to be honest. It's hard. Like, it's not easy. Like, we joke about American Muscle, which was our show that we shot in Plymouth about Mike Barwis's gym. Chris really put his heart and soul into it, and it was a very challenging experience. And it was canceled after 3 episodes. And these animals at Discovery, I was at a Vanity Fair event. I was asked to be on this panel that Judd Apatow, can I tell this story?
I think so, but they are like recording it, so you just want to be careful.
Oh, it's fine. So there's a gentleman who makes like $40 million a year named David Zaslav. And he was in the backstage area at this. The Vanity Fair just exists to invite important people to basically talk about how important they are, which is entertaining. And so I'm in the green room, and I look to my right, and Judd Apatow is talking to George Lucas, because that's what you do at these things. And I see David Zaslav. So this is only a few months.
The head of Discovery.
Only a few months.
The channel that canceled our show.
That would be amazing if David Zaslav found Detroit PBS and really came after me for this.
He's got tentacles everywhere.
And so I see this dude backstage, and I'm just like, man, I gotta talk to this motherfucker. Like, how do I pass this up? And so I go up to him, and I introduce myself. I say, David, my name is Mike Farah. I'm president of production of Funny or Die, and we just made a show for you called American Muscle. And he looked at me, and I'm not making any of this up. He looked at me and said, so how do you think we should be monetizing content?
Which is a very pertinent question to completely other things.
My panel was done, and he was getting ready for his panel with like the president of HBO, Richard Plepler, who's a total badass, and he was just like, so how should I monetize content? So I gave him some stock answer about, like, if there's one thing you can do in Hollywood, as long as you can talk about monetizing content, you could have a career for decades. Like, that's how it works. So I give him an answer. And I guess he liked the answer because he nodded, and he was just like, you know, I was talking to Barry about buying you. I said, Barry Diller? He's just like, yeah. I said, David, that's College Humor. I work at Funny or Die. College Humor is another website where they do similar but very different things than us. And I said, that's College Humor. I work at Funny or Die. And I kid you not, he looked at me, he was just like, oh, Funny or Die, yeah, we should do something with you. And I said, we did a show called American Muscle. And he looked at me, he was like, oh, that was a great show. And he actually meant it. Like, it was objectively a very good show.
It was a good show.
And he was like, that was a great show, but it was never going to work. It's never going to work. Sports doesn't work for us. And so in that moment, you realize that 2.5 years of our lives never had a chance. Literally never had a chance. They pulled it after 3 episodes.
And it never had a chance.
Our mom hates bad language. You should have seen her language when that show was canceled. She was ready to go outside and tell them what's what. But
what's interesting is that it never had a chance because of that man. Because what as the top, and it's almost almost impossible to get to the point he's at, but he is actually at the point where he can simply say, I don't like this show, this isn't going to work. I've allowed this to get this far, We had 8 episodes. So it wasn't like they said, you can't shoot anymore. We had 5 more episodes that they could have run, but they decided not to and decided to put on a rerun of a car show instead.
And they didn't even officially tell us that it was never going to air again until 2 weeks ago. And they call me because they want to be, stay in good favor with Funny or Die. And like the head of the network, the person who like reports to this David fellow, is like, well, we just love Funny or Die and we just want to keep working with you. And I was just like, well, I appreciate you saying this. I didn't even tell you this, but like, I was just like, but I just can't have a bullshit Hollywood conversation. Like, that was a very traumatic thing. You made mistakes, and it's going to take a long time before we ever want to work with you again. And she said, I respect you for saying that. I said, well, that's what you do when you're from Michigan.
Did you actually say that?
Thanks, Chris and Mike, for proving that creativity can start and does happen in Michigan. It's been fabulous listening to you talk about your adventures here and abroad in LA.